So Stephen, I'm sorry to tell you that libertarianism and the Kalam can continue to live happily ever after. And so that epiphany of yours does not hold water, from which I conclude that it didn't come from God. But hey, there's at least one thing we agree on, right?
Just over a week ago, Lucas of the channel Deflated responded to my video titled The Great Cost of the Kalam, in which I expressed that unless I'm mistaken, the Kalam cosmological argument and libertarian free will are incompatible. For context, here's how I expressed the crux of my case. According to libertarianism, that is, according to the vast majority of theists, the will of a free agent is at least partially non-determined. Thus, by freely stating whatever begins to exist has a cause, you have demonstrated the contrary. You have proven its falsehood. You are contradicting your statement through the very means in which you express it. Or put it this way, assuming libertarianism, your act of stating the first premise of the Kalam was caused at least in part by your free will. But your free will was not caused by anything. Your free will is, by definition, not caused. It's non-determined. So that's the contradiction I'm playing with. It seems to me that one can't believe that the will is free from causation, while simultaneously believing that everything that begins to exist has a cause. Within my original video, I encourage people to correct me should they believe I'm mistaken or missing something important, and Lucas has very kindly obliged.
Hi, I'm Lucas, and this is my new channel, Deflated, which answers the skeptics' objections to Christianity.
As is the standard, I recommend that you view his response in full before continuing here, especially considering that I'm going to respond to his objections in non-chronological order for reasons I'll make clear shortly. So let's get straight to Lucas's core objection by playing it in full and then responding one segment at a time.
Let's say my wife asks me in the morning if I'd like a cup of coffee, to which I respond with the free act of saying, "Oh, a cup of coffee would be great." Now, is on libertarianism the coming into existence of my freely chosen response, "Oh, a cup of coffee would be great," uncaused, popping out into thin air from causal nothingness? Stephen claims so, but there is no reason to think that. The reason or cause why I freely respond by saying, "Oh, a cup of coffee would be great," is because I love coffee, also because I feel tired and I'd love to wake up, and because I love sitting down with my wife over a cup of coffee. So my love for coffee, my desire to wake up, and my love for my wife are all causes behind the free act of responding, "Oh, a cup of coffee would be great." So free acts do not need to be thought of as coming into existence without a cause, even on libertarianism. And thus, there is no contradiction between libertarianism and the first premise of the Kalam. Stephen is simply mistaken when he thinks that libertarianism implies that acts of free will don't have a cause.
Okay. So the first thing to make clear is that libertarianism is not the view that acts determined by free will, such as requesting a coffee, are uncaused.
The free act,
but rather that the will itself is uncaused. As Theiopedia's entry on libertarian free will puts it, all free will theists hold that libertarian freedom is essential for moral responsibility, for if our choice is determined or caused by anything, including our own desires, they reason, it cannot properly be called a free choice. Now, I will further bolster this definition in a few minutes in reply to some of Lucas's criticisms of where and how I attain my definitions, but for now, this is what we'll work with, especially considering that despite Lucas's objections, he accepts Theiopedia's definition, and indeed the other two definitions that I gave in my original video.
The definitions on libertarianism he's given are pretty straightforward and uncontroversial, I'd say.
So to put the locus front and center, let's map out the example that Lucas gave. We have the act of Lucas accepting a coffee.
"Oh, a cup of coffee would be great."
And we have various causes of this act, such as Lucas enjoying the taste of coffee.
"I love coffee."
Him wanting to wake up.
"I feel tired and I'd love to wake up."
And him wanting to sit with his wife.
"And because I love sitting down with my wife."
Given these causes, Lucas concludes that there is therefore no contradiction between libertarianism and the first premise of the Kalam.
And thus, there is no contradiction between libertarianism and the first premise of the Kalam.
But in actuality, Lucas has not given us an example of free will, but rather determinism. Remember, free will theists hold that if our choice is determined or caused by anything, including our own desires, it cannot properly be called a free choice. Lucas's love of coffee, his desire to wake up, and his love for his wife are causes of him accepting the gracious offer of coffee. But here's the question, was any of these causes themselves uncaused? Was any of these causes themselves free from determinism? Well, let's go back to the map. Is Lucas's love for coffee determined by prior causes? Yes. His love for coffee is determined by his taste buds, which in turn are determined by his genetics, and so on either forever or until something in the chain is not determined, which proponents of the Kalam insist is God. God is the only thing that is not caused, for God is the only thing that did not begin to exist. What about Lucas's desire to wake up? Is this determined by prior causes? Yes. Lucas wants to wake up because he's tired. And he's tired because he just woke up from a long slumber, and so on either forever or until something in the chain is not determined, which, again, proponents of the Kalam insist is God. And what of his love for his wife? Was this determined by prior causes? Yes. He loves his wife because of the wonderful experiences he's had with her in the past, which in turn was determined by both of them being compatible. And so on, again, either forever or until something in the chain is not determined. And this brings us to the very heart of the Kalam, which claims that everything other than God has a cause, since everything other than God began to exist. The claim, therefore, is that there is no break in any of the deterministic chains. They all descend back to God. Libertarian free will, on the other hand, is the assertion that there are countless breaks in the deterministic chain, namely, whenever a free agent exercises their will. They reason that if their will is determined by anything, including their own desires, then it's not free. Thus, Lucas has not adequately dealt with my objection, and so, for now at least, I'm still convinced that the Kalam is not compatible with libertarian free will. To maintain a consistent worldview, theists must either exercise free will to reject the Kalam, or be determined to reject free will. So, with Lucas's primary objection out of the way, I'd now like to respond to a few of his other objections, beginning with one which he dedicates the vast majority of his time to.
So what's Stephen's argument? He starts by defining relevant terms, such as to begin or to exist, and the definitions he offers are pretty straightforward and non-contentious. However, the problem starts when he gets to the word cause, which he defines as follows.
A cause is a person or thing that gives rise to an action, phenomena, or condition.
That's the definition offered by Google, and I have no issues with it. But immediately after defining cause, Stephen goes on to say that
it is a synonym of determinism.
But that's simply not true. The term cause does not mean the same thing as determinism.
Lucas is of course correct here. I misspoke. Cause is not a synonym of determinism. I always try to avoid mistakes such as this, but I don't always succeed, and Lucas emphasizing my slip-up is fair play. I was wrong, my bad. Fortunately, however, and most crucially, Lucas accepts the definition of cause that I gave.
And I have no issues with it.
And so one might hope that he'd quickly move past my trivial mistake to get to the core of my argument, but unfortunately he doesn't. Here's just a few examples of him reiterating the same objection.
No, it doesn't. The only reason why Stephen would make this fallacious claim is that he wrongly holds cause and determinism to mean the same thing. In other words, cause and determinism are not the same thing, not at all. This utterly arbitrary link is made only by Stephen to give the impression that causation essentially equals determinism, because causality is not causal determinism.
Again, Lucas is correct here. I misspoke. And the last objection from Lucas I'd like to respond to refers to how I ascertain my definitions and how transparent I am with where I get them.
Stephen then turns to the term libertarian free will or libertarianism. If I've tracked his sources correctly, he quotes definitions given by Wikipedia and the website informationphilosopher.com, which say libertarianism holds on to the concept of free will that requires the agent to be able to take more than one possible course of action under a given set of circumstances. And libertarianism is a school of thought that says humans are free from physical determinism and all the other diverse forms of determinism. He adds to that,
it is, in a nutshell, the notion that one has the freedom to do otherwise. Or to quote the propaganda machine that is Theopedia, libertarian free will means that our choices are free from the determination or constraints of human nature and free from any predetermination by God.
Now, on a side note, what is interesting is that when Stephen quotes Theopedia, he does what a researcher normally does and lays fully open the source he's referring to.
So as you've just had a taster of, throughout Lucas's critique, he perpetually gives the impression that I'm shady with my resources, and even makes out that he's had to conduct his own research to find them.
He neither clarified where he got them from, if I've tracked his sources correctly.
But as is the case with all of my videos, I gave all of my references in the description. I have not and will never hide my references. What's more, when it comes to definitions, I personally couldn't care less where one ascertains them from, so long as they accurately represent the word or term. And so given that Lucas accepts my definitions, this is, so far as I'm concerned, all that really matters.
The definitions on libertarianism he's given are pretty straightforward and uncontroversial, I'd say. And I have no issues with it. And the definitions he offers are pretty straightforward and non-contentious.
To quote John Duns Scotus, who is widely considered to be the father of libertarianism, nothing other than the will is the total cause. Okay, so let's wrap up.
Greetings from Beirut to Portsmouth, and let me know what you think.
Greetings from Portsmouth to Beirut, and thank you, Lucas, for taking the time and energy to respond to me. I sincerely appreciate it. Anyhow, as always, thank you kindly for the view, and an extra special thank you to my wonderful patrons and those of you who have supported the channel via other means.